Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual field trip. I'm Teresa, one of the board members at Washington's National Park Fund, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping items. This field trip is 45 minutes long with a discussion with our speaker and a Q&A at the end. Feel free to enter any questions in the Q&A box as we go, and we'll get to as many as possible before we wrap today. Closed captioning is enabled, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. We welcome any feedback as we work to make these trips as accessible as possible. For those new to Washington's National Park Fund, also known as WNPF, we are the official fundraising partner for Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. We have the honor to work closely with park leadership to fund 30 to 40 priority projects each year. And this year, we're so excited to announce that we've reached a record-setting year of support with over $2 million awarded to the parks for projects that fall into four core areas: advancing science and research, improving visitor experiences, expanding volunteerism and stewardship, and embracing inclusion. Thank you so much. Today, we're also so excited to highlight a very special guest from the volunteer program at Mount Rainier National Park. We're joined today by Kevin Bacher, who has been the volunteer program manager at Mount Rainier National Park for more than 23 years. He'll be retiring at the end of this month after 32 years of public service, all but a few months of it with the National Park Service. Kevin's a Northwest native who started the National Park Service as a seasonal ranger in 1994, where he met his wife-to-be. His career took him from Mount Rainier to other national park sites, but family roots and the pull of his heart brought him back here to Mount Rainier in 2002. Thank you so much, Kevin, for the stories you're about to share and for many decades of incredible service to our national parks.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So thrilled to share the time with you. And with that, Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to chat with you all. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and telling a few stories. So I understand that you have a few questions to launch things off.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah, my apologies, Kevin. All right. Yes, definitely. So the to start us off, uh, we would love it if you could describe the early years with the volunteer program and what it looked like when you first joined the team.
Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, as Teresa said, I've been at Mount Rainier full time since 2002. Prior to my arrival here at the park, the volunteer program had for many years been run by a volunteer couple by the name of Clay and Dixie Gatchell, whom you see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen there. They were volunteers themselves, and between the two of them, they dedicated about 2,400 hours a year to managing the volunteer program at the park. They retired in the centennial year of Mount Rainier in 1999 from managing the volunteer program, and then there was a period of a couple of years when the program had kind of coasted under interim leadership with staff that didn't really have time to dedicate to it until I arrived in October of 2002. Now, I came to Mount Rainier as an interpreter. That was my career before coming to Mount Rainier, working in the visitor centers, doing the evening programs, things like that. So the volunteer program was not the reason that I came to Mount Rainier, and in fact was just a collateral duty for me when I came, something that was supposed to only take 20% or less of my time, although in reality it took a little bit more like 30% of my time. And then during the summers when I was really running the interpretive program, uh, I would hire a seasonal staff person to take over the program while I did that. So the program itself looked very much like it does today, just smaller. A lot of the programs that we have today were there, just not quite as big. The Meadow Rover program had been created by the Gatchells back in the 1990s, so it existed, but it was pretty small. Um, there were trails programs, re-veg programs, interpretive programs, backcountry patrol programs, all like we have today. Um, but there have been some things that have grown, some things that have been added to the program over the years since I got here as well.
Thank you so much for walking us through the early years. I'd love to follow up on the last thing you noted. You mentioned the volunteer program was there in a form when you joined, and then it also has grown and evolved during your time with the park. Can you talk more about how it has grown and evolved and how that process came to be?
Yeah, so as I said, when I first started managing the program at Mount Rainier, it was just a collateral duty. So one of the first things that I did when I came to the park was to advocate for that management to be full time. Uh, Looking around the National Park Service, I could see a lot of volunteer programs that were in parks of comparable size to Mount Rainier that were a lot bigger and more successful. And the consistent factor was that they had full-time volunteer program managers. So it made sense to me that investment of having a full-time manager would pay off for the volunteer program. But creating new positions in the National Park Service or in the federal government in general has always been challenging. So it wasn't until something happened in 2006 that was kind of a challenge for the park, but had a silver lining to it that really gave us an opportunity to explore some new opportunities. And that was the flood that happened in November of 2006. Now we had some big atmospheric rivers this past fall, but the one that we had in 2006 was even bigger than all of those put together. We got 18 inches of rain up at Paradise in 36 hours in that single event, and that caused such flooding around the park that it washed out roads and bridges and trails and campgrounds and infrastructure all over the park. And in fact, you couldn't even drive into the park for 6 months because the roads were literally missing. Uh, so during that 6 month period, as we were rebuilding, the park started, no pun intended, to just get flooded with offers of help from the public, people who wanted to help us to rebuild. And a lot of these messages were very personal. People would send us an email or a letter or a phone message, and they would say things like, "My family has been camping at Ohanapikosh for 3 generations, and I'd like to give back. My grandmother's ashes are scattered at Round Pass, and I'd like to give back." They always told these personal stories and then ended by saying, "How can I give back?" So the park started looking for ways to do that. And about the same time, we were approached by Representative Jay Satz from the Student Conservation Association, who had helped Yellowstone National Park recover from the big fires back in 1988. And they suggested doing the same thing at Mount Rainier, bringing a crew in to help us to rebuild. And our superintendent, Dave Ubaraga, said, "Hey, that's a great idea, but let's take it one step further and use the SCA crew to help us to capture all of this public interest and to work with members of the public to rebuild the park." And so out of that partnership with SCA came a coalition that also included the Washington Trails Association and Washington's National Park Fund, the National Parks Conservation Association, and the Mountaineers that all came together to rebuild the park and to work with volunteers from the public to do it. And to coordinate this effort, they made my collateral duty position managing the volunteer program, temporarily a full-time one. And that was so successful. We accomplished so much just in the first year that we literally doubled the volunteer participation at the park. In a single year, we went from 42,000 hours of service by volunteers to more than 80,000. And then sustained that for the following year and through the flood recovery effort. So it became very, very clear that this model of having someone managing the volunteer program full time and working in partnership with members of the community was something that was really advantageous to the park. And in fact, we've sustained that ever since. The park received some awards. We got the George B. Hartzog Jr. Award for Outstanding Volunteer Program due to the efforts of our volunteers during the flood recovery. The Longmire Stewardship Campground that a lot of our volunteers stay in when they volunteer in the park today came out of that flood recovery effort as a place for volunteers and the Student Conservation Association crew to stay while they were working. And you see a lot of the partnerships that we developed during the flood recovery effort still being key to our program today as well. Washington Trails Association, for example, which started during the flood, is still with us and still offering volunteer opportunities to members of the public throughout the summer. People can sign up for those projects through the WTA website all summer long and participate either as individuals or with special groups. Like the picture that you see there on the left is an all-girls crew that they led a project with a few years ago. That's in Glacier Basin. Youth crews have flourished as well, with both Student Conservation Association and more recently with Northwest Youth Corps. And these have often included targeted recruitment programs like Rainbow Crews that focus on providing opportunities for LGBTQ plus youth, or ASL crews for young people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and that's been really exciting as well. Washington's National Park Fund, of course, is a partnership that remains key to our program today, and one that has allowed us to expand in all kinds of different ways. WTA provides, through donations from people like those who are listening in today, provides donations that cover about 50% of the volunteer program's budget. And if you take my salary out of that, which is covered by appropriations from Congress, the rest of the volunteer program's budget, WNPF provides about 80% of what makes that program run. And it's a huge return on investment. If you figure every possible thing that you can possibly put into it as an expense, the return on investment for every dollar that gets donated through WNPF is about 4 to 1. So we with the volunteers that we work with today, about 70,000 hours of service per year, we get about $2 million worth of equivalent time and effort if you were to replace the volunteer efforts with paid staff and benefits. The Raven program, the Roadside Assistance Volunteer Network that you see in the lower right-hand corner there, is a program that came out of WNPF donations, and that allows us to help visitors who break down in the park, who lock their keys out of their cars. The Meadow Rover program, of course, is another one that has truly benefited from Washington's National Park Fund partnership and donations. WNPF funding allows us to hire seasonal staff in the summertime to coordinate the Meadow Rovers at Paradise and Sunrise, and that helps us to better coordinate those volunteers, to do so more safely, and to increase our capacity to work with volunteers. In fact, last year, we worked with 319 Meadow Rover volunteers between Paradise and Sunrise, a huge team of people who contributed more than 14,000 hours of service just last summer and contacted almost 250,000 people out on the trails that we keep track of with little clickers. So 224,000 clicks on those little clickers last summer. People who might never contact a representative of the National Park Service if it weren't for those volunteers out there. And and that contribution has been incredibly helpful to the park, not only in helping visitors to have a better experience in the park and a safer experience in the park, but also to address issues like what do we do during the COVID epidemic when the visitor centers are closed down? Well, our Meadow River volunteers were out there talking to visitors. How do you keep all of those visitors safe when they're visiting national parks for the very first time and don't know how to do so safely? And our search and rescues are numbers are climbing. Well, you start deploying the Meadow Rovers earlier in the year as the snow is melting out, before the meadows are even visible, in order to convey those preventative search and rescue messages, and that brought our SAR numbers back down. Rovers are also have been fantastic for responding to things like our timed entry experiment over the last couple of years and getting the word out to visitors and having information kiosks along the roads and providing a presence during the Perseids meteor shower when we have a lot of visitation at night and not a lot of staff available other than Meadow Rover volunteers to work with them. Citizen science has been another really great success story that has been funded a lot by Washington's National Park Fund. And we have quite a few citizen science programs in the park now that have grown up since the flood recovery effort back in 2006. The Meadow Watch program, for example, in the lower left corner there, surveying wildflower blooms and when the snow is melting off of the trails. And we have learned a lot about how climate change is affecting the park because of that. The Cascades Butterfly Project, looking at the pollinators of those flowers and how those are changing over time. Bat surveys, amphibian surveys, taking volunteers out to the remote wetlands and ponds and lakes all over the park to survey frogs and salamanders, and then along the way to do mercury sampling to test for airborne pollutants and to see how that's affecting the ecosystems as well. All things that we couldn't really do without the help of volunteers. And then the most important thing I think that has happened over the 23 years that I've been here is just that the volunteer program has become an integral part of the park. It's really embedded in the culture of Mount Rainier National Park today. So much so that you see things like the upper left picture there with Randy King out working alongside volunteers on National Public Lands Day, and our current superintendent showing up at trainings and things like that to say thank you to volunteers in person, and making the volunteer program such a priority and making our volunteers feel so valued and appreciated.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. The facts and figures are extremely compelling. The amount of growth from the early days to where we are now in terms of just sheer numbers of volunteer hours is staggering. I heard it, but it's different to hear it again from someone who is a part of making that happen. Thank you. And for all of us on the line who have, do, or will volunteer, that's such an incredible path to have paved. So much more to say, but we other have questions. The You mentioned a bit about how the volunteer program has grown, what areas it serves from the logistical standpoint, it's in so many areas beyond. Want to talk more about that and explore further what, in your view, makes the volunteer program so important overall to this park and the people and ecosystems within it. Can you expand further on that?
Yeah, absolutely. When people talk about why are volunteers important, the first thing that always comes to mind is, well, volunteers get a lot of work done, and that is absolutely true. That is a key part of what happens with our volunteers in Mount Rainier. That 70,000 hours of service is amazing. I mean, up in the upper left-hand corner there, you see a picture of a volunteer group called Mission Continues. There's about 24 people in that picture. Imagine 36 people, half again the number of people in that picture. They're working full-time year-round at Mount Rainier, and that's about the contribution that volunteers provide. It expands our staff tremendously. And there's a lot of things that we just wouldn't be able to get done if it weren't for the contribution of our volunteers. But then volunteerism has other things that are a little less obvious that are benefits as well. I came up in the interpretation program in the National Park Service, and the goal of interpreters in the national parks, the ones that work in the visitor centers and do the guided walks and things like that, is to connect people with their parks. Because we find that when people recreate in the parks, they want to learn about the parks, and our interpreters help people to learn about the parks that they're visiting. And then when people learn about the parks, they want to help protect the parks, and they're looking for ways to help protect the parks. And what better way is there to do that than to roll up your sleeves and work alongside the paid staff in stewardship of this place that you've fallen in love with? So that's what the volunteer program offers. I think it's kind of the pinnacle experience of visiting a national park, is to get to help protect it for the enjoyment of present and future generations. You really get to be a park ranger yourself, in the protection of the parks. And then those volunteers go back into the community, and they take that love for the parks with them out into the community, and they become our advocates. They become our ambassadors. So they share the love of the parks with their friends and their neighbors, and even then with the larger community beyond that. I mean, we live in a participatory democracy here in the United States, so yeah, you can't discount the advocacy that volunteers provide in the political process that we all live in as well. Obviously, we don't tell our volunteers to do that. We don't tell them what to do. But many of our volunteers are very passionate about the parks, and they do participate in that political process. And I think it's a hallmark of democracies like the United States that people do participate and contribute to the things that they love. And we are tremendously grateful for those that advocate on behalf of the national parks in the ways that they feel are are best suited to what they believe in.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. It is forming community. And what more impactful thing can we do for our parks and form and keep and expand the community around them, internal and external to the parks? Thank you. All right, moving on to something a bit lighter. In your decades in the Park Service and working with volunteers, I'm sure you've seen some things. So, like to talk about any memorable or funny or embarrassing stories to share about yourself or any of the others who've joined your experience along the way and the time that you've spent out there.
I have so many stories. We could do a whole virtual field trip just on stories from 23 years. And I'll begin by saying there is no possible way that I can touch on all of these stories. So many of the volunteers out there listening in are going to have favorite stories, and I'm going to not mention them. It's not because I've forgotten them or don't consider them important. There's just too many. There's just too many. So let me mention just a couple of ones that kind of span the breadth of what the volunteer program has meant over the years. The pictures that you see on the screen at the moment are from a program called the Japan Volunteers in Parks Association. This is a program that started in 1994 at Mount Rainier when a professor at Waseda University in Tokyo, Japan, Hiro Yamaguchi in the bottom center of the screen there, contacted Mount Rainier National Park and proposed bringing a team of a couple dozen students from the university across the Pacific Ocean to Mount Rainier for 2 or 3 weeks to do some volunteer work at Mount Rainier to learn about volunteerism and the culture of the United States. And the superintendent at the time at Mount Rainier agreed to that, thought it was a great idea, and this started a partnership that lasted for about 20 years with these volunteers coming across and doing project work. And there are a lot of things all around the park that you see today that were built or improved by the JVPA volunteers. The boardwalk at Couts Creek, for example, the accessible ramp going up onto the trails at the plaza there at Paradise were built by the JVPA crew. And then one of the things that was really unique about that program is that just because of a quirk in the State Department regulations regarding visas for visiting volunteers, it was very complicated for those international volunteers and very expensive for them to get the J-1 visas that you would have to get for full-time volunteer work in the park if the park were providing something of benefit in return, like housing. But there's a little bit of a loophole, which is that if the park isn't providing any kind of a benefit in return for the volunteer service, that J-1 visa isn't required. And so the workaround that the park and JVPA came up with was to have those JVPA students hosted by members of the community. And this just made the program even more impactful because it became a program of really international goodwill between Japan and the United States, with those volunteers living in the homes of people in the communities, learning about American culture, eating our food, going out to Mariners games to see Ichiro play on the weekends. And then after 20 years, when the program came to a natural conclusion, they decided to invite us to Japan, those of us who had participated in the program, as as kind of a return favor. And so there were a couple dozen of us that flew to Japan and spent a week touring Japan, visiting Tokyo. I got to go with my son. We did a volunteer project up by Mount Fuji, up in Fujikawa Guchiko, and what an amazing experience that was. I know we're running out of time, so let me just mention a couple of other examples very quickly. One from this past summer that was very, very different from the example that I just listed. We had uh, a den of Cascade red foxes discovered near one of the very, very popular trails at sunrise, right at the beginning of the season. And some of you may know that Cascade red foxes are a subspecies that is only found at Mount Rainier and Mount Adams, very, very endangered, very vulnerable in part because they tend to get habituated by people. People feed them. They're so cute. People feed them and then they become habituated to people and they get hit by cars. So it was very critical that this this den of fox kits be protected. And literally within 24 hours, the superintendent's office at the park had responded by closing that trail. And the Meadow Rover volunteers, under the leadership of our summer seasonal coordinator, Dave Divelbus over there, had recruited Meadow Rover volunteers to do the very boring work of sitting at the access points to that trail, literally from dawn to dusk for the entire length of the summer, hundreds of hours of time just sitting there and talking to visitors and explaining why the trail was closed and keeping people out of there. And because of that, those fox kits were successful. And they're out there in the park now, roaming around, finding their own territories, finding their own mates, reproducing. The first successful den that researchers have seen in many, many years. And it is not a stretch to say that my grandchildren and their grandchildren and the grandchildren and their grandchildren of those volunteers who helped out this summer might see Cascade red foxes at Mount Rainier because of the work that those volunteers did this summer. And that's just an amazing thing. Another great example right here on the left-hand side, a young man by the name of Moses Fosberg. His mother, Arlie, was a meadow rover and brought her son along meadow roving, which is not that unusual. A lot of people bring their kids along when they volunteer, and then kids learn about the value of community service from their parents. It's a wonderful thing. But Moses happened to be on the autism spectrum and relatively severely on the autism spectrum. He was one of those people that was not really communicative with people. So he would just kind of tag along. But his mother, Arlie, noticed that he was very intent on what she was doing and seemed very interested in trying to find ways to help out. And so she came up with a really ingenious idea, which was to create these puppets that you see there in the lower left. Really detailed puppets. I mean, they have these little teeny tiny backpacks on the back of them with little teeny tiny 10 essentials in the backpack. And she discovered that Moses could actually talk to visitors through these puppets. He wouldn't look people in the eye in the way that many people on the autism spectrum don't, but he would hold up the puppets and he would tell visitors about how important it was to stay on the trails and to carry the 10 essentials. And he literally came out of his, well, figuratively, came out of his shell because of his experience through the Meadow Rover program. And there's so many stories like this. Alan Dreyer, there on the right-hand side, functionally deaf, didn't think he could volunteer with his hearing dog Damien, but absolutely was able to do so through the Meadow Rover program, reading lips. Go to the next slide. There you'll see some more examples. The youngest volunteer we've ever had there on the left-hand side, 2 years old, volunteering on National Public Lands Day many, many years ago. How does a 2-year-old volunteer? Well, she takes the little boxes of plants and hands them to her mother to plant. And then her mother puts the plant in the ground and the 2-year-old hands her another box of plants. Volunteering at 2 years old. And then she came back year after year after year after year for more than a decade, helping on National Public Lands Day. On the right-hand side there, our oldest volunteer of all time, uh, Anne Marie, who was 88 years old when she finally passed away this past summer. A fixture on Mount Rainier, just deeply in love with the mountain and sharing her love for the mountain with other people. So many other stories on the next slide as well. People like Flash Parlini in the upper left-hand corner there, who worked at Boeing and came out to Mount Rainier every weekend to volunteer. Tom Lindsay in the lower right-hand corner there, who grew up at Mount Rainier with his father volunteering as a ranger and living in the community building apartment at Longmire, and then came back 50 years later to serve as our Longmire campground manager. staff that I've worked with and learned as much from as they learned from me. People like Mo and Natalie and Camille and volunteers like Crow and and Margot there in the upper right-hand corners. So many people and such a community of people that have contributed in such incredible ways over the years.
Thank you. I know that those stories are just the tip of the iceberg, but even that, wow. The park brings together the best people. Yeah, we know that, and this is just more evidence to support it. We've got one more question, and then we're going to pivot to live Q&A from our folks in attendance. Before you step away into your next chapter, we'd love to hear what your hopes are for the volunteer program in the future.
It has been such a good run at Mount Rainier. I have often said, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, that serving as the volunteer manager at Mount Rainier is the best job in the National Park Service, and I just lucked into it just by dumb luck, and had the best career I could possibly have had. Um, Looking forward, I hope that the volunteer program remains an integral part of Mount Rainier National Park. I hope we find creative ways to keep working in partnership with us, even as we face challenges, keeping our paid staff levels as high as they used to be. I hope that the volunteer program remains nimble as these changes occur. And I hope that we can adapt and respond in creative ways when there are needs like COVID and like the protection of those fox dens. I hope that our volunteer program maintains a commitment to professionalism, safety, quality, learning opportunities for our volunteers, things that our internal surveys have consistently indicated are priorities for our volunteers and reasons that they keep coming back year after year to work with us. I hope that the volunteer program continues to seek ways to be inclusive, to reach out to new parts of our community, to break down cultural, economic, and logistical barriers that keep people from participating and expanding opportunities for people to have this wonderful experience through the volunteer program. I hope we can uh, do outreach to youth and to culturally diverse people. I hope that we can find ways to continue to be a positive force in people's lives. I hope that we can become known as one of the best volunteer programs in the National Park Service. Mount Rainier has a very, very long history of stewardship. And when I say a long history of stewardship, I mean a very, very long history of stewardship. Um, we've had people stewarding the landscapes at Mount Rainier for 8,000 years. Um, the 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 Nisqually, the Cowlitz, the Yakima, the Puyallup, the Muckleshoot, the Squaxin Island peoples that were here for thousands of years before the National Park Service um, took over the stewardship of the land. So I really feel like the work that I've done in my career and the people who have done that with me are simply carrying a torch that has been passed forward from generation to generation for a very, very long time. And now I just feel like I'm passing the torch on to the next generation of people. Uh, and I truly believe that by doing so, we will carry this commitment to enjoy and protect and preserve Mount Rainier on into the future.
Those are great wishes. We will all help manifest those as truth. for you and with you into the years to come. Absolutely, yes. We've only got time for a couple of questions from our audience. I wish we had time for so much, so many more. There are so many great ones. But we'll focus on just a couple to wrap this up. The first one, for those of us who are not yet volunteers or want to be an even better volunteer for Mount Rainier or the national park system in general, what, in your opinion, makes a great volunteer? What are you looking for?
Oh, the number one thing that we're looking for is simply a passion for the place. Everything else, everything else follows naturally from that. If you love the park, um, then it just naturally follows that you're going to do great work. You're going to be dedicated to to the work, receptive to it, and and you're going to have a great experience.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right. I know I said one more, but we're gonna break the rules and get two more. Oh, because we got a good one come in. Uh, Kevin, for you personally, how has this work over the years shaped you as a person? How has it changed you?
Mm. Oh my goodness. I came into the National Park Service as a career because I was passionate about it. I was passionate about the places. It was all about the places. What this career has done for me is to teach me that yes, the national parks are about the places, but it is just as much about the people. Um, that's what I've learned over the course of my career. When we talk about the National Park Service, we always think about the places, but it's the people just as much. And these places wouldn't be as amazing if it weren't for the equally amazing people that value them and do everything in their capacity to protect and sustain them and pass them on.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, one more to bring it home for now. If you would have one request for the people out here today and into the future, how can we best support the parks right now?
Find the one thing that you can do and do it. And everyone can do something. Um, we have volunteers who are retired and come to Mount Rainier and work at Mount Rainier almost as full-time as our paid staff. But we also have people who have busy lives. They've got kids going to soccer practice and uh, and maybe they only have time to come up and volunteer once a year. But they choose to do that. They choose to invest the little time that they have to come up and make a connection and to contribute. And then there are people that can't do even that. They have all kinds of reasons that they aren't able to volunteer, and that's fine because there are so many things that people can do. You can contribute financially through Washington's National Park Fund or through other organizations that support the national parks. You can write letters to members of Congress and tell them that you love the parks and tell them why and advocate for the kinds of decisions that you think are going to sustain the parks in the future. You can share your love of the parks with your friends and neighbors and tell them why this is so important. Everyone can do something. It doesn't matter if you're 2 years old or 88 years old. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if you are living just outside the boundary of a national park or on the other side of the world. It doesn't matter if you are disabled or it doesn't matter. Everyone can do something. We are the National Park Service, all of us, and we are the ones that can protect them for the future. And there's nothing I'm more passionate about than that idea. It's what has motivated my entire career, and it is the reason that I will not stop protecting the national parks in retirement. I'm going to be out there volunteering alongside the other volunteers. I'm going to be out there writing letters to my congressional representatives. I'm going to be out there taking pictures and sharing them with my friends and neighbors. And you can do that too.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Enthusiastically agree with all of that. We are in this together. Thank you. Okay. Wow. Deep breath. We are, we are, we are sadly at time before we do our final remarks. Kevin, thank you. Thank you so much for spending
Oh, thank you for this opportunity.
oh, an absolute pleasure. Hearing from someone like you with your passion and your heart and your experience for the parks is special. Thank you. All right. Okay. Before the day ends, before the session ends, do you want to mention how you can learn more about the projects we fund here at the Washington's National Park Fund, which you can find more about at wnpf.org. We also want to thank you for joining us, of course, for another virtual field trip. If you want to see
And,
this,
and I would also mention that you can go to our website as well, nps.gov/MORA. You can learn about the volunteer program there and how to participate if you aren't a volunteer already. And you'll learn from our website, just as you will from WNPF's, about all the incredible ways that this organization is helping us.
yes, yes, important ad. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, absolutely. And for this field trip, if you want to join us again, if you want to hear some of the great things that Kevin shared, again, this will be uploaded onto the WNPF channel and YouTube. You can find us by searching Washington's National Park Fund on YouTube to find this recording and a wealth of other virtual field trips that we have posted in the years past. And we invite you to stay tuned for another virtual field trip that we have in the works. I can't spoil it quite yet, but I promise you're going to want to come back and join us later this season for another amazing guest talking about other important work in the national parks. And if you want to join us for other future events in person, online, we have a variety of different opportunities to connect with our and your community. You can find us at wnpf.org/events. The only thing left to say for now is again, thank you. Thank you again, Kevin. And thank you for all of us for supporting the parks in every way that we can. And so excited to see you next time or on the trail. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.